Hi, I'm Hannah Wallace and welcome to FinextraTV. Kindly joining me now is Sandy May from Elastacloud. Hi Sandy, thank you very much for speaking with us today.
Yeah, it's a pleasure to be here, thanks.
Great to have you on, and now there's a lot I want to cover with you today, from the type of data you're working with, how you're leveraging AI and machine learning to help firms meet their goals, and what a successful project might look like at Elastacloud. But first, let's start with your mission. What kind of firms are you working with that are using tech solutions to reach their goals? Let's start there.
Yeah, sure thing. So we're working with a wide variety of businesses that cover all sorts of industries, because obviously this sustainability challenge is a global challenge that covers all types of industries across all types of sectors. So as part of that, we are leveraging all sorts of data assets to work with these companies as well, predominantly coming in through chief sustainability officers and understanding what their business ambitions are. What we're finding from these chief sustainability officers is that they are more and more concerned about how their overall business is working. So instead of just seeing their top level business entity, they want to understand what the sub-level departments, groups and individual businesses that they may have bought through time and how they are achieving their sustainability goals as well.
Brilliant, thanks for setting the scene there. So let's talk about data then. What kind of data are you working with when it comes to ESG, and how is it being processed, sourced, and maybe touch on some of the challenges there as well?
Yeah, sure thing. So the biggest challenge with sustainability data is that it's such an all-encompassing term that it has to bring together so many different departments of a business. So many people just think of sustainability and think of the E from ESG, so environmental, where you'll cover things like your scoped emissions, whether that's scope 1, 2 or 3, which cover all sorts of things such as how much fuel you're burning, but also how your supply chain is using emissions and how much emissions they're creating. That's just one category though. There's all sorts of elements that people just don't really think of. So in your society, in your social and in your governance, you've got all sorts of things around HR and people. But then just much, much more than that. So what you also have to understand is how people are commuting to work. So this is trying to bring back in travel data. You have to understand the types of meetings that you're having. So even having an interview like this, we could try to calculate the emissions that we're generating here and how many people need to come in to do this type of interview. So data is a huge challenge that many organizations are still facing, with a massive disparity between people on the ground, and that can be receiving deliveries of things like cement for building manufacturers. So somebody has to actually physically write down that something has been received, and that has to then be processed. So there's still a lot of manual processes that are causing many challenges that need to be reported up to the top level of an organisation.
Fascinating. A good example there. I'm sure you have lots of those. All right, so how can AI tools help in this space then? How are you leveraging AI and machine learning to help those organisations reach those goals and get from A to B using those technologies?
Yeah, so the first thing that we've developed internally is a product named Sustainability Studio. So Sustainability Studio is predominantly looking at the ESG of an organisation. What we've quickly realised here is that there's quite a big problem, as I've mentioned before, that companies don't care too much about their overall ESG. What they start to care more and more about is the sub-entity levels, so the different businesses and different departments. What we're trying to do with AI is to leverage the data that organisations have to understand how different business units will start to achieve that overall group net zero and when they will start to do that. So that's using predictive analytics built into Sustainability Studio that's looking at the actual raw data assets and not just the overall group metrics. So what this allows a company to do is to see a trend and a pattern for individual business units to actually see when net zero is going to be achieved and whether their public goals, government goals are realistic to them or not. Part of this is also looking at climate and revenue at risk. So this is a really important part where AI is coming in. So it's less about the reporting and more about a business understanding what could actually be revenue at risk, what assets could be at risk from global climate events. So we've created models that are predicting climate events for up to 100 years into the future. And then lastly, where we're looking as well is to do with controversy. So this is where large corporations predominantly are doing practices that are not ideal from a sustainability point of view, whether that's environmental or whether that's to do with their employees. So this comes from news data predominantly, and what we need to do is to understand the contextualization of this article. So that's where natural language processing comes in, and we will try to score various different news articles to give a view over what a company is doing publicly and whether that is a positive or a negative.
That's really interesting. I'm sure we could have an entire interview just on that topic. So what should be the response here then? How should financial marketplace participants be responding, and how can they make data collection and compliance easier? What about that?
Yeah, it's a really good question, and it's quite a complex one as well. So one of the biggest problems that we see is that financial market participants predominantly care about the group ticker level. So they care about ESG on an overall group. And businesses just don't care so much about that apart from an investment point of view. What they have is people who are dedicated to individual business units who do care about what the sustainability of that business unit that feeds back into the actual group is. I think this is something that the financial markets can start to work to progress and to create change here. Controversy is a really good example of this, where one sub-business unit of a generally well-performing ESG company might actually be having some very, very negative consequences, and there might be a lot of controversy around them, but that might not necessarily impact share pricing because it doesn't have that much of an impact on ESG. I think if there is a stronger push from the financial markets to have companies report at least at sub-entity, if not country level as well, in terms of their business operations, this is going to be something that aligns to what companies actually want to report on, and something that's going to give us just a better kind of global presence for ESG and understanding of what companies are really doing.
Well, I hope to touch on that topic a little bit more in the follow-up interview from this, but tell me a bit about your projects. What does a successful project look like, and what should the end goal be beyond compliance?
Yeah, great question. So compliance is the first part. So we understand that many governments are putting out net zero goals for businesses. Net zero tends to be year on year. So that's making sure that I'm offsetting or capturing or replacing at least the amount of carbon that I produce every year. But that should just be the first stage. We know that there are many, many businesses that have been around for multiple hundreds of years that are massive polluters, and a year-on-year change is just a drop in the ocean compared to what they've actually created during their lifetime. So I think what we should start to see is a movement away from net zero year-on-year to global net zero for the entirety lifetime of an organisation. So for us, a successful project is something that adds actual business value back to an organisation. So again, we don't see top-level ESG scores as being that beneficial to a business apart from how the investment world sees them. What businesses really want to see is lower granularity. They want to be able to see things that tells them about individual business units. And for us, a successful project is when a customer says to us, this has added value back to us as an organisation, not just as a board. And I think that's one of the kind of key difficulties that is faced in this area. It's really good to see that chief sustainability officers tend to have a view across many different sub-business entities rather than just an individual group. So yeah, for us, that is where we see a successful project, when we're creating organisational change, not just a board being happy, essentially.
A brilliant mission, and looking forward to seeing more of those type of projects coming from Elastacloud, but we'll leave it there for now. Thank you so much, Sandy. It's been brilliant.
Yeah, it's been a pleasure. Thank you very much.